Do not attempt to reload the page. Your connection is fine. We are now in control of the signal. We can control the length, the depth, width, and even height. We can suspend you in a million different worlds, or shift the focus to one single planet for crystal clarity and beyond. You are about to experience the wonder and ambiguity of the Polyverse. Please stand by. The Planet of Dr Mordad. The Ansi were amongst the greatest scientific minds in the known galaxy. Despite the fact that they, as a race, would freely share their knowledge and technology with the other, lesser races of the stars, none of the said other races had even approached the technological heights that the birds had. While the majority of the race did play free and loose with their knowledge and power, there were a few rebels, hoarders, and recluses that shared none of the universal sharing mentality that the rest had. These secretive Ansi, if ever referred to by the rest of their race, were known as Anki. To keep their hard-fought knowledge and technology secret from the rest of the galaxy, these Anki made use of some few strange and odd worlds found throughout the cosmos that were also not on speaking terms with normal physics. Some had even claimed that their bludgeoning of science into submission caused the freak worlds to exist, but no one could confirm it. Such was the case with the planet below. This was a lab world, and they scared the hell out of anyone that got stuck on them. On this sphere, everything was designed and crafted with the sole purpose of killing, maiming, and otherwise endangering any sapient race. Note: the race depicted is felinoid in nature and decidedly not familiar with Earth. Wherever possible, Earth-equivalent terms have been used for clarity of storytelling. "Entering Atomo, set flights to Aether mode," droned Magni, the leader of this 5-person combat commando squad known as a Dagger. "Set all sensors to passive standard. Let's keep as much of a surprise for the rebels as we can. Maintain a tight formation." The transition of a fighter from space to air was one of the most dangerous non-combat evolutions a pilot could attempt. Even highly experienced warriors and huntresses had ignobly crashed and burned because flight errors of calculations. These 5, top-of-the-line yet still experimental craft were buffeted by epic turbulence as flames licked their viewports. Each pilot was on the edge of their seat as they were forced to constantly readjust their vectors, while they constantly monitored all systems so that nothing could catch them by surprise. None wanted this to be a one-way trip.
"Active ping,"
called Heimnell, the technical specialist of this Dagger.
"Anti-air signals, multiple bogies inbound, evasive maneuvers."
The perfect delta formation broke apart as each pilot plotted their own course to safety. Missiles passed through the air right where the fighters had just departed. Each missile and the drone that had launched it picked a different fighter to pursue and zipped off. As they dogfought, the smaller and far more maneuverable but less well-armored drones continued to harass. Then, giant lizards joined the fray. Aerial fights in an unfamiliar location tended to be very problematic. This was no exception. Planes, drones, and reptiles dove, climbed, twisted, dived, turned, shot, and avoided getting hit while trying to hit hostiles and not friendlies for what seemed like forever. Unfortunately, they failed more often than not in their pursuits. Heimnell was the junior member of the team. She had way less experience than the others and was really only a recent addition. She, like all tech specialists in all Daggers, was here because she knew more about science, technology, and engineering than the others combined. For most Caxar, figuring things out without bullets or blade was not a career path. But she was the go-to girl and had been all her life. None of her knowledges, except perhaps statistics and tactics, would help in this situation. Caxar were more about kicking ass first and maybe asking questions later, if they remembered after the mead. The situation had not improved any, and could really be said to have gotten worse since the Ansi introduced the species to the galaxy at large. That was when the small Duema class, which had never really had much of a following, really began to die out. After all, why figure it out for yourself when the answer was handed to you in the skulls of one's enemies? Yet the Caxar hated the idea of being subservient to anyone, so, indirectly at least, All scouts, or scientists, in essence were VIPs. In fact, anyone worth their salt was given a Pri 2 protection status. That meant, aside from the Khanate or Vanam quorums, no one was more important, especially in the field.
Repeat, weak spots noted in lizards. Shoot out their wings, right where they connect to their bodies.
Heimdall called out to her compatriots, but she got no response. Trying to keep her strengths, she continued to note weak spots, calling them out and even launching targeting flares so that even if the others couldn't hear her, they could see where the weaknesses were and exploit them. Unfortunately, she became far too engrossed in her sensors and neglected to note that a dragon was hot on her heels. When she finally noted it, she even tried to evade, but it was too little, too late. The beast had managed to catch her plane, causing catastrophic damage. As she careened out of control, she noted that Magni himself crashed his fighter into the body of the beast, taking it out with him. With the knowledge that her actions and even inactions had potentially led to the death of her leader, she blacked out. When Heimdall came to, she was in a crater surrounded by burning and charred wood, stone, and dirt.
I'm not any survivors of Seth's Vanguard. Landfall 4x6 grid south of Op Point Fehu. Request rendezvous point and further instructions. Repeat.
After a few moments of failed communications, it became clear that no one was out there who could hear her.
Fenrir's balls. Radio's out. Wonderful.
She sighed. She looked over her equipment and did some tests.
Looks like some kind of artificial interference. Fenrir's great fuzzy balls. Well, I guess I'm on my own until at least Fehu. Better start off,
she grumbled, starting to gather her equipment to travel overland. As the lone Dwemer on the planet and barely more than a cub, her hand-to-hand and survival skills were even less impressive than her piloting. She had never had to worry about really being good at any self-defense. In fact, it might have negatively impacted her tech skills. Yet, she had always resented her Pri 2 status, though objectively it was really the only reason she was still alive. So, despite the danger, she was as excited as she was apprehensive about her first true lone outing since before her adult status. The Caxar, particularly their warriors, resented any reliance on tech to give them an edge in combat. Despite that, the Skalds did manage to get one concession designed and even distributed amongst the other races. The Skalds' only real contribution to galactic science. This contribution was light-powered armor. Radically redesigned from Vale or Caribou construction exoskeletons, this latest version was capable of color shifting amongst the armor plates, a sort of medium-level camouflage. In high read rate active hue matching (CRAM) mode, this ghillie protocol was essentially a cloak. However, that mode was very power hungry and the illusion could be broken when hit or attacking or even moving really fast. Worse yet, on a primitive world such as this, the artificial signature was unmistakable. Any decent Skald could track or possibly even counteract the user. Fortunately, there were other modes. For example, the one-off quick-scanned palette match mode, QSPM, was perfect for a primitive world such as this. A scan would be made of the surroundings, an algorithm would determine a random pattern of colors needed, and the armor would take on these colors and not change until activated again or disabled. Normally, the color was always set to match the user's fur patterns or a particular clan's colors, as was the case with all Caxar clothing. In all modes, the gloss levels and intensities could be adjusted, improving any unit's combat effectiveness. Heimdall, after gathering all her equipment and weapons, made her way some distance so that the colors of her armor would match the normal for the area. With a sigh, she activated her OQSPM and stood for a moment as it did its thing. Slowly, her rusty jaguar pattern was replaced by the dark greens, browns, and purples of the planet's flora.
Never watched it happen before. That's kind of cute. Wonder how many times I'll have to reactivate the protocol.
She started off slowly, paying more attention to her equipment than her surroundings as she familiarized herself with the lay of the land. She was well away from the final destination, a heavily fortified outpost on the top of some very rugged mountains that intelligence suggested had been taken over by the rebels. These insurgents had committed the ultimate sin within the Khanate. They threatened the foundations of their society theirself. This small group of rebels was made up of more than just Caxar youth, however. It was some daughters from all of the races that were corrupted by the unethical experiments by an exposed Anki. The scientist in charge of that secret project, which should have been a red flag in and of itself, had promised, amongst other outrageous claims, to increase the combat effectiveness of the subjects. The Khanate and Van Am Quorum had only agreed to this cultural exchange to meet supposed obligations that the Ansi had claimed they incurred by being introduced to the rest of the galaxy. The Caxar hated owing anything, so with great ire they agreed to it so as to expedite the payoff. The fact that the whole war had started because of that failed experiment only served to anger all of the races. On a new planet, especially a primitive one inside a dark matter nebula, one would have no knowledge of how to find their way. There were no landmarks, no paths, no constellations, not that that would help in the daylight anyway, so one had to use their wits to get where one needed to go. At least some things, like rocks and trees, were essentially the same. Even the worst huntress should be able to find their way with some effort. Though it had been some time since her rite, she still remembered a thing or two about primitive survival. After she had finally finished triple-checking her data, she set off at a quick yet comfortable pace. There was no reason to rush and tire herself out when there was little chance of backup. After all, there was still a fortress to assault at the end of this journey, and on this planet everything was at least 75% heavier than back home. As she traveled, the simple beauty of nature enraptured her. Subconsciously, she began to slow as the beauty overtook her and she sighed in contentment. Suddenly, her ears perked up at the sound of some local wildlife.
And that's a carnivore. Wonderful, she groaned,
Chambering around.
Oh, let's see, tone and pitch suggest it has a SMU count of at least 3 times mine, possibly vulpine in nature. I hope it's not a pack creature, or something worse.
She inhaled deeply and set off with purpose again. She didn't want to be caught unawares. She was. In the time she had been stationary, tangling vines managed to encircle her ankles.
Hella's horns!
She screamed, drawing her boot dagger to hack back at the growths. As she fought off the plants, and even made some headway, small rodent-like raptors took advantage of her issues. The little buggers were quick, and their teeth and claws were sharper than flint. For the first few moments she held her own, but was soon overrun by the increasing numbers. At the point there were just too many to fight off with her dagger, she cursed and drew her twin pistols and opened up with a vengeance. Her aim was true, and the promise of easy prey had faded away, so the surviving animals skittered off.
Ah,
She grunted, holstering her guns.
Can't let that happen again. Best get to high ground.
As she made her way to a large trunk, she activated her suit's active sensors. It had been some years since she had climbed a tree, and it had never been in full gear. These trees were quite a bit larger than any she had seen back on the homeworld of Minfalam. But she was not deterred. She adjusted her equipment and made sure everything was properly secured, and made sure her gloves were positioned so that her claws could properly extend. Slowly and with great care, she made her way to the canopy, far above ground. As she summited, she was blown away by the beauty of the vista now surrounding her from horizon to horizon. The forest was vast, larger than any landmass back on Minfalam, the archipelago of archipelagos. Her clan was from one of the larger forested islands, and this was pure beauty to her.
And I can't believe Yongvia still insists we should have stayed on our own world. If she would just come out and see these places.
She smiled and inhaled deeply.
She would... This would be a perfect world for the clan to claim for the Khanate. Far more beautiful and functional than Ironwood Isle.
As she admired the view, she was abruptly tackled. Because the branch was so large, she narrowly avoided falling to her death, but it was too close for comfort. In fact, she had had to use her boot knife to stall her descent, the wood being so soft her short claws wouldn't have had much purchase.
Muspelheimer!
She yelled as she worked to find a way back up. The beast, an ox-sized vulpine beast with devil's horns, watched her progress, pacing along the branch, intent on keeping her down. Several times in the ordeal, she almost made it to safety, but the beast barred her way. After half a dozen failed attempts, she cursed loudly and quite vividly, and pulled out a handgun. Though severely disadvantaged, she scored several direct hits, but to no avail.
Oh, Hella's heavy crooked horns! That thing's immune to blaster fire? Phew!
Feeling the burn of hanging for so long in full battle gear on a high-mass planet, she was running out of time and options.
Really didn't want Akphios to be a sacrificial blade, but...
She sighed as she began to swing back and forth in the direction of the trunk. The beast seemed to know what she intended, but couldn't be in two places at once. Once she had enough momentum, Heimdall threw herself at the trunk, all claws extended. She was prepared for the pain, she thought, but sudden tension on claws, especially at indirect angles, could rip them out. Even though she was only strained, it was a rough experience. The sudden fire that shot through her fingers, toes, arms, and legs was almost enough to knock her out.
Fingers, fuzzy balls! I hope I never have to do that again,
She growled as she recovered. Willing the fire away, she began to combat climb back up the branch so that she could face the devil fox head on. While blade usage may have fallen out of primary roles in combat, being replaced mostly by guns and such, Kaxar continued to practice blade work. Kaxar, being very traditional and all, and slow to change, still expected every warrior and huntress to be well practiced with blades. Before one could pick up a gun, they had to prove proficiency in all 47 forms of blade combat that the Kaxar had developed over their millennia of existence, as well as the ones they had learned from the other races. Heimdall was well practiced as any skald, but by no means was she a master in it like a huntress would be. After all, she was just a Dwemer, and as long as she didn't stab herself in a fight, she was considered practiced. But even had she been more than just an honor guard at her mother's pyre, fighting animals was nothing like fighting sapients. Not letting doubt even enter her mind, she drew her twin monomolecular-edged wakizashi and bellowed a war cry. Her first few attacks landed hard and deep, drawing midnight violet blood. It screeched in protest, backed off for a second, then reasserted itself. It had somehow wrapped itself in an energy barrier that absorbed some of the damage, but each strike did cause damage to the barrier, and it couldn't last forever. For a few precious minutes, the fight looked to be slightly in her favor. Then, she yelled, dodging a spray of acid.
It's Pit's Venom too! Fenrir's balls, this day keeps getting worse.
Fear and fatigue crept to the surface of her thoughts. Her slashes and stabs became more and more erratic as pain took hold. Just as she was about to give in to the inevitable, the foliage above rustled, and Baston, one of her fellow dagger mates and one of the greatest huntresses of the age, dropped in, stabbing her katana through the beast's skull, killing it instantly.
Your active scans got kicked on in the struggle,
she remarked offhandedly as she stepped off the beast.
Op orders were passive only. You should turn it off, and lock it this time. Oh, thanks.
Heimdall grimaced uneasily as she manipulated her controls.
What are you doing? You need to see this, Techie,
Baston returned as she continued her surgery of the beast's cranium.
I took another one of these devil foxes down a few clicks from here. And yeah, this one has the same tech in its spinal column.
As she finished her lobotomy, she threw pieces of tech at Heimdall to look over.
You know the blood's corrosive, right?
She remarked, beginning to examine it anyway.
And yet, that tech is unaffected,
Baston drugged, cleaning her and Heimdall's weapons.
Tell me why, Techie. Well, give me a minute, Bast.
Heimdall sighed as she continued her examination. Baston, like Heimdall, had activated her OQSPM on her armor, and the beautiful silky black of her fur had been replaced by the colors of the forest. The colors of her armor were less digital and more analog. She must have been moving while her scan took place. The differences were subtle, but Baston's kind of fit into the environment better. After a few moments of quiet contemplation and examination, Heimdall spoke up.
This is some bird-level tech. I've never seen anything like it before. But if pressed to guess, I'd say these things are connection nodes for a local animal intelligence sharing network. And they grew inside the animals rather than being implanted. Whoa, that makes them basically self-reliant drones that could be linked to, together, and or controlled remotely. Let's hope the rebels haven't figured out how to tap into this. Could you figure it out, Scaldy? Not yet. I need a lot more time and equipment to do that. Well, even if they haven't, we may still be in deep,
Baston sighed, starting off.
No doubt they know we crashed on this planet. Stay close. We will need your brain to finish this. Nice to know how much you care, Bast.
Heimdall mocked as they jumped off the branch onto another.
Hey, I've already saved you once on this op. You still owe me dinner from last time. Yeah, just put it on my tab.
The pair made good time, managing to avoid more enemies after Heimdall managed to modify the signals of the Devil Fox's nodes to make them appear to be part of the ecosystem.
Hey, Bast, something's going on with our trinkets. You mean other than them growing in wild animals? Yeah.
She scoffed.
There's more bandwidth usage on this than one would expect from just animals. Maybe it's growing in spiders and insects, too. Now you're just being silly. That would be different, higher frequency rather than lower. I think something is actively trying to reconnect us. And we're not providing the right passcodes or something. I don't know if I can keep this up with this limited equipment. Just what we need,
groaned Baston.
Let's find the source of that whatever. I don't want to learn what else this demon planet has to offer.
As they searched, another beast used the opportunity to ambush them both. This latest hassle was a smaller, much more nimble monkey bear. While the devil fox used blunt force tactics, this creature showed knowledge of the third dimension, and was quick as Helheim was long. It seemed intent on just knock them off to be taken care of by the fall from the deadly height to the hard ground below. Months of tandem training had almost melded their minds, however. Baston's experience seemed to drive both of their bodies, as Heimdall's strategy drove their tactics. The pair tumbled and evaded and attacked like two bodies of one mind. Together, they managed to maneuver the monkey bear to a point that Baston could attack from the rear, impaling its heart on her katana.
Hey, something happened with the nodes,
Heimdall announced.
Almost as if... Wait, that's not sap coming from that tree. Then this goo... Something is in this trunk. That thing is 1,000 years old. 267. Apparently conditions are favorable here.
Heimdall returned absently as she continued her examination.
This is some kind of conductive... Am I going to like what you're about to say? This tree, maybe even every single plant, they're all biosynthetic hybrids. This whole planet could be a computer. Not even the birds have this level of tech. By the snout of Anubis, I think I hate this planet.
Baston groaned, then quietly.
But I bet you love it. Wait, you know what this means, right? This is one of the legendary lab worlds.
Heimdall's face lit up.
Imagine the knowledge we could learn, the tech we could acquire. Mission first, juju magic after that.
Carefully but expeditiously, they made their way to Fehu, stopping every so often so Heimdall could readjust the signal on their nodes to continue to be invisible. The op point was at the base of the mountain range that they would have to scale to get to the fort. As they approached the op point, they noted a looming danger.
Bast? That is one of the dragons that took the fighters down. Yeah, and it's circling. It might have found the others,
Baston noted. Ensuring that they were still invisible to the wildlife, they made their way to the epicenter and noted the flame-breathing lizard was locked in combat with Askir and Halborn.
Definitely don't see that every day,
Heimdall casually remarked.
I know. I'm really beginning to warm up to this place.
Baston smiled as she crept to the underbrush.
Hell, I wouldn't even mind taking a hunting vacations here. Or maybe we could set up rites. Well, on that note, to the halls of the Valiant, I guess.
Heimdall sighed as she followed. It took some time, but with 4 skilled opponents, the dragon started to lose steam, and the battle was finally ended.
Glad to see you made it, Scaldy Bunny.
Halborn smiled as the pairs met by the giant corpse.
Would really hate to have to train a new techie.
Halborn and Askir must have landed nearer to the mountains. Halborn's leopard print and Askir's calico were replaced by the drab grays and sparse violets of the mountains. Halborn and Heimdall nuzzled, while Baston and Askir exchanged less dramatic, more formal greetings.
You only like me for my brain, huh?
She mock-chided.
Best brain I've ever seen, he chuckled. Speaking of, what do you make of this?
He produced a piece of tech similar to what the girls had already harvested, only this one has been completely destroyed.
How did you manage to break it? We couldn't even put a dent in ours.
Heimdall gasped. Well, you know how. He loves to smash things, Askir harumphed.
So I take it you haven't discovered any great secrets then, huh?
Well, not yet.
Heimdall shrugged.
The sooner I get some real tools and a workstation, the sooner I'll be able to make heads or tails of this.
We should move on then. Our point won't be easy to get to, Askir grunted.
What of Magni?
Baston asked, not starting off. After his sacrifice for our Skald, we can't wait for a ghost. If he's alive, he'll find us. Let's move out. It's like this planet is actively trying to kill us, Askir groaned as the ground shifted again, and another plume of noxious fumes blossomed around them.
Oh well, our delightful techie did forget to mention that she thinks the whole planet is a computer.
Baston returned.
So I guess we're just viruses to it, and this is just an immune response.
You could have mentioned this sooner, Askir sighed. It's never simple with the birds, is it? Who else would it be? Don't even try to pretend huntresses are any more comprehensible, Halborn laughed. We mere warriors are just hammers to their blades.
You don't have to earn brownie points with me.
Heimdall started.
She's not a huntress,
Interrupted Baston. Your doohickeys are lighting up, Halborn noted.
Looks like the planet's antibodies have found a particularly stubborn parasite,
Heimdall returned.
Magni!
They all gasped as Heimdall started off. Triple time to the commander. Move out! Askir didn't even have to issue the order as they were already running. The quartet arrived near the outpoint just in time to see Magni, still in his Siberian tiger stripes, punch a pile of moving rocks, causing them to explode. You're late, he noted simply as they approached. His physical prowess and size was impressive. Many warriors preferred open combat as compared to huntresses who usually stuck to the shadows, but Magni was an extreme example of this. Rarely did he ever use tech other than guns. When he did use tech, others got nervous because that meant shit was about to get real. None of the quartet offered any explanations. Excuses, as far as any Caxar were concerned, was a sign of weakness. They just accepted loss and moved on, like good little soldiers. We are 3 hours behind, he grunted, starting off. I've already scouted ahead. I found service corridor for the fortification, but a Skald is needed to get us through.
Sir?
Heimdall started as she went over his armor's health status.
You have fractured ribs, a few torn tendons, and your snout's broken.
Shows my left arm and my spleen has burst again. It'll heal. Move out.
At least take some nutrients.
The lower levels of the fort were not that well guarded. As their information on the composition of the forces was sketchy at best, the quintet still had to keep up their guard. With great care, they made their way through the compound, clearing rooms as they went. Somebody thought they were going to be here for a while, Halborn remarked as they finished clearing another room.
More like a lot of someones were hoarding arms and ammunition.
Heimdall returned.
Whichever bird built this place was preparing for war. War with who?
Baston scoffed.
From this equipment we've already seen, they could take over every significant power in the supercluster, and still have more.
That is not an answer we need now, Magni interrupted, all business as usual. We are here to take out the rebels, and we finish jobs. The speculation subsided as ordered as they made their way deeper into the compound. Finally, they made their way to the central corridors. This was no small task, as the entire facility was built by and for people that could fly, but they were determined to clear every last square inch of the facility. This area had many catwalks and pits that allowed bird people to go up and down at their leisure. The team traversed the catwalks, searching for the control room.
Movement ahead! Active HRAM!
Baston called out. The quintet brought up their guns to high ready, fingers on triggers, looking through sights. They formed a circle to ensure they covered all angles as Heimdall went to work trying to cancel out the cloak. As she finished manipulating controls, the HUDs on their visors displayed contact information on potential bogeys. They slowly continued along the catwalk, ever wary of danger.
There is a sign above the door at the end of the scaffolding.
Heimdall called.
Says roost. It could be paranoid bird speak for control.
That's our new outpoint. Let's go, Magni ordered. Though they were never shot at, they continued to shoot at phantoms, trying to get a bead on their enemy. Finally, a cry of pain sounded from a form that faded into view, just to escape behind a corner.
Why are you people here? Haven't we suffered enough?
Called a distinctly not Caxar voice.
This is a hellhole, and we're trapped.
You are with the cowards that have betrayed the Khanate, Magni announced as they made their way to the source. We are here to mete out justice.
Ha! So they did manage to get a message off.
At least their people didn't respond, the voice laughed. How do you think you'll get away, though? Not even the bird who designed this place, some weirdo named Mordad, could escape his own creation. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it, Magni shrugged. He had no reason to believe this person, but even if there was truth, he didn't care. Mission always came first. Surrender and we will make sure this is painless. Y'all here for the host. They went crazy even before they destroyed that symbiote lab. Even my own sister, the sad laugh echoed hollowly. Something is controlling them, or trying to at least. Somehow, the influence is not as strong here. They want to get away, back to the voices. They made it to the corner, and when they looked around, the source was revealed.
You're a caribou.
The girl lying on the floor was larger than even Magni, probably stronger too. The valet were strong and loyal workers, with very little ambition of their own. They prided themselves, however, on building great structures that defied imagination, but not much else. Yeah, I'm valet. My sister was part of the trial. I was there for support. I didn't want to leave. She barely held herself together. I had to come. I couldn't even fight if I wanted to. They've become too powerful, and this planet is hell. Everything attacks you. I couldn't leave, so I hid.
Why didn't they search for you?
Baston scoffed, not believing.
They don't care about me. All they care about is leaving and eating. They've eaten all they could find, and then started on each other, the first to fall. This facility is full of food. Why would they?
Started Heimdall, horrified.
They don't want to leave the roost. They want to be rescued.
Is she telling the truth? Magni asked of Heimdall.
All physiological signs point to her at least believing what she is saying. But I'm not. I don't.
Good enough for me, Magni grunted. Do you know how many are left?
There are 4 of you cougars and 2 birds.
Let's move out.
They have power. You can't stop them.
Caxoff finished missions, regardless of the odds. The dagger breached the door and stormed the room, setting off proximity mines. All but Heimdall recovered almost immediately and started throwing plasma downrange. The rebel Caxar huntresses jumped into battle, while the 2 birds remained at controls, continuing to try to hack the system and find a way to escape. The room was large, filled with many consoles, tables, equipment, and experiments. The rebels' powered armor were originally a dark maroon, the color of blood. The octet of fighters engaged in gun kata that could make clerics flinch. Blades flashed, guns banged, equipment exploded. Intermittently, each fighter even tried to activate Haram, at least for a moment. One thing that didn't drop was the odd energy barriers that the rebels had. Looks like they figured out the local tech. Skald, fix this, demanded Magni, whose injuries were starting to slow him down. The only response was a displayed message on the Vanguard's HUDs. Different SIGD, not local or tech in nature, biologic, working on it. While all this had been happening, Heimdall had managed to maneuver undetected to the sides of the birds. Like giant bipedal parrots with arms, they were still intimidating. She managed to draw and ready her wakizashi, and with a burst of power and rage, she stabbed through the temple of the closest bird. As it fell, the others, as if in a psychic clink, stumbled, allowing Magni to rip out the heart of the rebel he was fighting. The remaining bird abandoned her code-breaking to attack Heimdall. The rest recovered quickly and redoubled their efforts. Somehow, they even started using psychokinetic attacks that the Vanguard had no defense against. Then, Magni fell, and Baston got knocked across the room. All the rebels managed to lock weapons and hold the Vanguard still.
Pathetic cougars, the bird scoffed. Our symbiotes give us powers far beyond anything you can comprehend, and our psychic link connects us closer than you will ever be.
Suddenly, they all doubled over, holding their stomachs in pain. Taking full advantage of the situation, they were decapitated quickly.
The caribou was right. Their hunger was too extreme.
Heimdall panted, starting to work some of the surviving controls. The rest grunted in acceptance as they approached Magni.
The old man didn't make it.
Baston held back tears. For experiencing this presentation, please like and subscribe. You may also find these other presentations entertaining.